Hey there, sci-fi lovers. Welcome to our channel, where the universe unfolds and the impossible becomes real. If you're as passionate about the unknown as we are, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more mind-bending adventures just for you.
The cold blue glow of the star charts illuminated the dimly lit command center of the Buzzard, casting long shadows across the room as Nash Weaver and Alaric stood side by side, eyes fixed on the holographic display. The fleet's response to the data they had transmitted had been swift and decisive, but the weight of what they were now tasked with weighed heavily on them both. "They're mobilizing faster than we thought," Alaric muttered, studying the enemy fleet's positions on the chart. "The void is crawling with ships. It's like they've been planning this for years." Nash nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. The enemy wasn't just a rogue faction or a band of pirates, they were organized, disciplined, and equipped with technology far beyond anything the Principality had encountered before. The fleet's intelligence had confirmed the worst: this was an invasion force, and it was moving toward Federation space with frightening speed. "They've got enough firepower to tear through half the sector before we even know what hit us," Nash said, his voice low and steady. "And if we don't stop them here, we might not get another chance." The mission briefing they had received was clear: the Buzzard was to lead a covert strike against the heart of the enemy fleet, a command ship hidden deep within the void. Their task was simple on paper: disable the command vessel, disrupt the fleet's coordination, and buy the Federation enough time to prepare for the incoming invasion. But Nash knew it was anything but simple. "We're the tip of the spear," Alaric said, echoing Nash's thoughts. "We go in first, pave the way for the fleet, and pray we make it back in one piece." Nash glanced at his friend, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "We will," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We don't have a choice." The preparations were swift and efficient. Every member of the Buzzard's crew knew the stakes, and they moved with the kind of precision that only came from years of experience. Nash could feel the tension in the air as they armed the ship for the upcoming mission: plasma cannons charged, torpedo tubes loaded, stealth systems primed for maximum effect. Kara Ellis was in the weapons bay, overseeing the final checks on the ship's arsenal. She was focused, her sharp eyes scanning the readouts as she double-checked every detail. Nash found her standing by the plasma cannons, adjusting the targeting systems with a calm, methodical precision. "Everything in order?" Nash asked as he approached. Kara glanced up, a small, tight smile on her lips. "As good as it's going to get, Captain. We've got enough firepower to make some noise, but we're going to have to be careful. Once we're inside their formation, we won't have much room to maneuver." Nash nodded. He knew the risks. Once the Buzzard slipped into the heart of the enemy fleet, their only advantage would be stealth. A direct confrontation would mean certain death. They were counting on surprise, on precision, on outthinking an enemy that had every reason to believe they couldn't be beaten. "Keep us sharp, Kara," Nash said, his voice low. "We'll need every edge we can get." "You got it, Captain," she replied, her tone serious. "I'll make sure we're ready." Hours later, the crew assembled on the bridge, the soft hum of the ship's systems the only sound in the tense silence. Nash stood at the central console, the holographic map of the void glowing before him. The enemy fleet was spread out across the region, hundreds of ships forming a vast, interlocking formation that extended deep into the darkness. Their target, the command vessel, was at the center of it all, surrounded by layers of defense and firepower. Nash studied the map in silence, his mind racing through the possibilities. The mission was straightforward, but the execution was going to be anything but. The Buzzard had to slip past the outer defenses, infiltrate the fleet's formation, and disable the command vessel's communications array without being detected. One misstep, and the entire mission would fall apart. "All systems are green, Captain," Alaric reported from his station, his voice steady. "We're ready to move on your command." Nash took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "All right, let's get to it." Engage the stealth systems and plot a course for the void. We move in slow and quiet. As the Buzzard drifted toward the edge of the enemy fleet, the tension in the air was palpable. The ship's advanced stealth systems masked them from enemy sensors, but Nash knew it was only a matter of time before something went wrong. The enemy fleet was massive, their ships bristling with weaponry, and every second they spent this close to the enemy was another second closer to disaster. Approaching the outer perimeter, Alaric said, his voice barely more than a whisper. We're in their sensor range, but they don't see us yet. Nash's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair, his eyes fixed on the display. The enemy ships loomed ahead like silent sentinels, their sleek black hulls blending into the void. It was a terrifying sight, an armada of warships, each one capable of leveling entire planets. Keep it steady, Nash murmured. We slip in, we get the job done, and we get out. The minutes ticked by in agonizing silence as the Buzzard glided closer to the enemy fleet. Nash could feel the sweat on his palms, the tension in his muscles, but he forced himself to stay calm. There was no room for fear, not here, not now. Finally, they reached the heart of the enemy formation. The command vessel loomed before them, a massive, angular ship bristling with weapons and sensors. It was an imposing sight, its black hull gleaming with an almost malevolent presence. Target in sight, Kara reported, her voice tight with anticipation. We're within range of their communications array. Nash nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. All right, this is it. Kara, disable their comms. Alaric, be ready to get us out of here the moment they realize what's happening. The tension on the bridge was palpable as Kara worked the controls, her fingers flying over the console as she bypassed the enemy's security systems. Nash watched the display intently, his pulse racing as he waited for the signal that would tell him the job was done. Got it, Kara said, her voice filled with quiet triumph. Comms are down. Nash felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. Captain, Alaric's voice cut through the silence, filled with urgency. We've got movement. They're onto us. The alarms blared as the enemy fleet began to stir, ships shifting in formation, their sleek black hulls moving with deadly precision. Nash could see it happening on the display. What had been an impenetrable wall of silent warships was now a living, breathing organism, ready to strike. They hadn't been completely exposed yet, but the window of opportunity was shrinking fast. Get us out of here, Alaric, Nash barked, gripping the edge of his console as the Buzzard swerved hard to the left, engines roaring to life. Now. Alaric's fingers flew over the controls, pushing the Buzzard into a sharp turn as the stealth systems worked overtime to keep them hidden. But it was a fragile veil. The fleet's ships were already searching for the source of the disturbance, their weapon systems lighting up like a predator ready to pounce. We're not clear yet. Kara shouted over the noise, her hands still working to suppress what signal she could. They're running scans, long range and deep dive. They're not going to get a clean read, Nash muttered, his mind racing. Just keep us hidden long enough to reach the debris field. That's our only chance. The debris field, a massive collection of derelict ships and wreckage left from battles long past, floated just beyond the enemy fleet's perimeter. If they could reach it, the field would mask their presence long enough to make an escape. The Buzzard accelerated as the enemy fleet's ships moved in, plasma cannons glowing bright red as they scanned the area for any sign of an intruder. Nash watched the display closely, heart pounding in his chest. They had only minutes to reach the field before the enemy's sensors zeroed in on their exact location. Almost there. Alaric called out, his voice filled with tension. Hold on tight. A moment later, the Buzzard dove into the debris field, weaving between massive chunks of floating wreckage as the ship's stealth systems flickered back into full operation. Nash's knuckles were white as he gripped the console, eyes darting between the display and the view outside the viewport. The derelict ships in the debris field were ancient, their hulls rusted and torn from countless battles. Some still emitted faint energy signatures, their systems long dead but their ghosts lingering on. The field was a graveyard, a place where the past whispered through the dark. They're scanning the field, but they're not coming in, Kara reported, her eyes glued to her console. "We're still invisible, for now." Nash exhaled slowly, his heart still pounding. "Good. Stay quiet and keep us in here until they give up the search." The tension on the bridge was palpable as the minutes ticked by, the enemy fleet circling the debris field like sharks in the water. Nash knew they were searching for them, sweeping the area with everything they had, but the Buzzard had slipped out of their grasp for the moment. "They're pulling back," Alaric said finally, his voice tight with relief. "Looks like they're giving up the search." Nash felt the weight lift from his chest as he leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. They had made it, for now. "Good work, everyone," Nash said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "We're not out of the woods yet, but that was a damn good escape." Kara let out a small, breathless laugh, her tension easing slightly. "I can't believe we pulled that off. I thought we were dead for sure." "We're not dead yet," Nash said, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "But let's not celebrate too soon. We've still got a job to do." Back in the safety of the debris field, Nash and his crew had a moment to breathe, but the reality of the mission still weighed heavily on them. The enemy's communications array had been disabled, but the fleet was still out there, and the looming threat of invasion hadn't gone away. Nash stood in the strategy room with Alaric, Kara, and Lieutenant Jax, one of their most skilled engineers, poring over the data they had collected. The holographic display lit up with the schematics of the command vessel they had just infiltrated, its defenses and vulnerabilities laid bare before them. "We hit their comms hard, but it's only a matter of time before they get them back online," Jax said, his brow furrowed. "They've got backup systems we couldn't touch from the outside. If we want to cripple them permanently, we're going to need to go back in, this time, on foot." Nash sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. The thought of boarding the enemy ship again didn't exactly fill him with joy. The last mission had been risky enough, but going back in for a ground assault? That was a whole new level of danger. "How long do we have before their systems are fully operational again?" Nash asked. "Not long," Jax replied. "A few hours, maybe. After that, they'll be back in full force, and we'll lose our chance to stop them." Alaric crossed his arms, studying the schematics intently. "We need to go now. Slip back in under cover, get to the core, and take out their control systems from the inside. If we can pull that off, they'll be flying blind, and it'll give the fleet a real shot at taking them down." "It's a suicide mission," Kara said bluntly, her voice tinged with frustration. "They've already heightened security. We barely made it out last time. What makes you think we can get in again without being blown to pieces?" Nash nodded slowly, understanding her concern. It was a risk, a massive one, but it was also their only shot at turning the tide. If they could take out the command ship's control systems, the rest of the fleet would fall into chaos, and the invasion would stall before it even began. "It's dangerous," Nash admitted, his voice low. "But if we don't do this, we lose everything. The Federation, the Principality, everything we fought for, it all falls apart. This might be our last chance to stop them." The room fell silent, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Nash looked around at his crew, seeing the determination in their eyes. They were scared, he could see that, but they were also ready. They had faced impossible odds before, and they had come out the other side. This was just another fight. "All right," Nash said finally, his voice filled with resolve. "We go in. Jax, get the infiltration team ready. Alaric, plot us a course back to the command ship. We're going in fast and quiet, and we're not leaving until that ship is dead in the water." The crew nodded in agreement, their fear replaced by determination. They had a mission, a dangerous, impossible mission, but they were going to see it through. The preparations were swift. Nash's infiltration team, Alaric, Kara, Jax, and two of the most seasoned soldiers aboard the Buzzard, geared up in the armory, donning sleek black combat suits equipped with advanced cloaking technology. Their weapons were compact and deadly, plasma rifles designed for close quarters combat and silent kills. As they moved through the ship, the weight of the mission settled over them like a heavy cloak. Nash could feel the tension in the air, but he also sensed the unshakable bond that held his crew together. They had been through hell and back before, this was just another day in the life. "Ready for this?" Alaric asked as they stood by the airlock, his expression serious. Nash nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You know me, Alaric. I'm always ready." "Let's hope you're right," Alaric said with a grin. "Because this is going to get messy." The team gathered in the airlock as the Buzzard approached the command vessel, its engines humming quietly as they slipped back into the heart of the enemy fleet. Nash's heart pounded in his chest as the ship docked with the enemy vessel, the airlock hissing open with a soft click. "Move fast, move quiet," Nash said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "We get in, we take out the core, and we get out. No unnecessary risks." The team nodded in agreement as they stepped through the airlock, their weapons drawn and ready. The enemy ship was dark and silent, its corridors long and narrow, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights. "Stay sharp," Alaric whispered as they moved deeper into the ship. "We're in their territory now." The minutes ticked by intense silence as the team navigated the labyrinth of corridors, moving toward the heart of the ship. Nash could feel the weight of every step, the cold, sterile air pressing in on him from all sides. This ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a fortress, designed to keep intruders like them out. But they were no ordinary intruders. As they neared the core, the resistance finally came. A squad of enemy soldiers rounded the corner, their sleek black armor blending into the shadows. Nash barely had time to react before the first plasma bolt whizzed past his head, lighting up the corridor with a brilliant flash of blue. "Take cover!" Nash shouted, diving behind a nearby bulkhead as plasma fire erupted around them. The team returned fire in a flurry of plasma bolts, the sound of combat echoing through the narrow hallway. Nash's heart pounded in his chest as he leaned out from behind cover, firing off a few well-aimed shots at the advancing soldiers. One went down, his armor sizzling as he crumpled to the ground, but the others kept coming, their weapons blazing. "Jax, get us through that door!" Nash shouted over the noise, his voice strained as he fired another volley of plasma rounds. Jax nodded, his hands flying over the control panel as he worked to bypass the security systems. The door to the core room was just ahead, but the enemy soldiers were closing in fast, their weapons tearing through the air with deadly precision. "Almost there," Jax called out, his fingers moving in a blur. Nash gritted his teeth, his pulse racing as the firefight intensified. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. If they didn't get through that door soon, the mission was over. "Got it!" Jax shouted, a triumphant grin on his face as the door hissed open. "Go! Go! Go!" Nash ordered, his voice filled with urgency. The team surged through the door, plasma fire still raining down on them as they entered the core room. Nash's heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the room, his eyes locking onto the massive control console in the center. This was it, the heart of the ship, the place that controlled everything. "Jax, shut it down!" Nash ordered, his voice filled with determination. Jax moved to the console, his hands flying over the controls as he worked to disable the ship's systems. Nash and the others took up defensive positions around the room, their weapons drawn and ready for the inevitable counterattack. "Incoming!" Kara shouted as more enemy soldiers burst through the door, their weapons blazing. Nash fired off a volley of plasma rounds, his heart racing as the firefight erupted once again. The enemy soldiers were relentless, their black armor gleaming in the dim light as they advanced on the team. But Nash and his crew held their ground, their plasma rifles lighting up the room with deadly precision. "Almost there!" Jax shouted, his fingers flying over the console. Nash's pulse raced as he fired off another volley of shots, his heart pounding in his chest. The enemy soldiers were closing in, their weapons blazing, but they were running out of time. "Got it!" Jax shouted, his voice filled with triumph. The lights flickered as the ship's systems went offline, the control room plunging into darkness. Nash could hear the faint hum of the ship's engines dying down, the once imposing vessel now nothing more than a lifeless husk. "Let's move," Nash ordered, his voice filled with urgency. The team moved quickly, retreating through the door as the enemy soldiers scrambled to regain control of the ship. Plasma fire lit up the corridor as they made their escape, but Nash and his crew were already one step ahead. The Buzzard awaited them like a silent predator as Nash and his team raced through the labyrinth of corridors toward the airlock. The enemy ship was in chaos, alarms blaring as the crew scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. Jax had done his work, the ship's core systems were down, and without them, the vessel was nothing more than a drifting hulk. "Keep moving," Nash barked, his voice cutting through the sound of plasma fire echoing behind them. They had disabled the command ship, but they weren't out of danger yet. Enemy soldiers were hot on their heels, their weapons lighting up the corridors as they pursued Nash and his crew through the maze of passageways. "Almost there," Kara shouted, her pulse racing as she fired another burst of plasma rounds down the hall, forcing the enemy soldiers to take cover. They couldn't afford to slow down, not now. They were so close. The airlock loomed ahead, a small, circular portal that would lead them back to the safety of the Buzzard. Nash's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted toward it, plasma rifle in hand. The enemy was still closing in, but they had made it this far, he wasn't about to let them stop him now. "Get us out of here, Alaric," Nash called over the comms as he reached the airlock. The door hissed open with a soft click, revealing the familiar, sleek interior of the Buzzard. Nash and his team piled inside, the hatch slamming shut behind them just as the first plasma bolt struck the door. "Welcome back," Alaric's voice crackled over the comms. "I assume you had a pleasant trip?" "Move, Alaric," Nash snapped, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he collapsed into his seat on the bridge. "We're still not out of the woods." The engines of the Buzzard roared to life as the ship pulled away from the enemy vessel. Nash's hands trembled with the adrenaline still coursing through his veins, but there was no time to catch his breath. The mission was only half done, they had crippled the command vessel, but the fleet was still out there, and they weren't going to sit idly by while the Buzzard made its escape. "Captain, they're scrambling fighters," Kara reported, her eyes fixed on the display. "They're coming after us." Nash's stomach twisted into a knot. The enemy fleet had been thrown into disarray, but they weren't going to let the Buzzard slip away so easily. Dozens of fighters were already launching from nearby vessels, their engines glowing bright against the blackness of space as they raced toward the Buzzard. "Alaric, evasive maneuvers," Nash ordered, his voice tight. "We need to lose them." The Buzzard banked hard to the left, its engines flaring as it dove into the debris field. The fighters followed close behind, plasma bolts flashing through the dark as they fired on the fleeing vessel. Nash gritted his teeth, his heart pounding in his chest as the ship twisted and weaved between the wreckage, trying to stay one step ahead of the enemy. "Keep us close to the debris," Nash muttered, his eyes glued to the display. "Use it as cover." The debris field was a graveyard of ancient ships, their rusted hulls floating silently through the void. Nash's pulse raced as the Buzzard darted between the massive chunks of wreckage, narrowly avoiding collision with some of the larger pieces. The fighters followed closely, their plasma cannons blazing as they tried to lock onto the stealth ship. "They're getting closer," Kara shouted, her fingers flying over the weapons console as she returned fire. "We can't shake them." Nash's mind raced, his pulse thundering in his ears as he searched for a way out. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of options. The fighters were too fast, too precise, and if they didn't do something soon, the Buzzard would be blown apart. "Alaric, cut the engines," Nash ordered, his voice filled with grim determination. "We'll use the debris to mask our heat signature." "Cut the engines?" Alaric echoed, glancing at Nash with a raised eyebrow. "You sure about that, Captain?" "Do it," Nash repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. With a reluctant nod, Alaric's hands flew over the controls, and the Buzzard's engines went dark. The ship drifted silently through the debris field, its stealth systems fully engaged. Nash held his breath as the fighters closed in, their weapons lighting up the wreckage around them. But without an active heat signature, the Buzzard was invisible to their sensors. "They've lost us," Kara whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "I can't believe that worked." Nash exhaled slowly, his pulse still racing. "They'll find us soon enough," he muttered. "Let's not give them the chance." Bringing the engines back online, Alaric reported as the ship's systems hummed to life once again. "We're clear for now, but we need to move." As the Buzzard slipped out of the debris field, Nash allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had done it, they had disabled the command ship and escaped with their lives. But the fight was far from over. The enemy fleet was still out there, and the full force of their invasion was yet to come. Back on the bridge, the crew gathered around the central console, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of the holographic display. The enemy fleet was still massive, their ships spread out across the void like a deadly web. But now, without their command ship, they were in disarray. "We hit them hard," Alaric said, studying the map with a critical eye. "But they're not done yet. They'll regroup soon, and when they do, they'll come at us with everything they've got." "We bought ourselves time," Nash replied, his voice steady. "But it's not enough. We need to hit them again, this time, harder." "What are you thinking, Captain?" Kara asked, her eyes narrowing. Nash took a deep breath, his mind racing as he formulated the plan. The enemy fleet was still a threat, but they had one major weakness now: their command structure was crippled, and without it, they would be vulnerable to a coordinated strike. "We go back," Nash said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We take out their fleet one ship at a time, disrupt their formation, and give the Federation enough time to send reinforcements." The room fell silent as the weight of Nash's plan sank in. It was a bold move, dangerous, even, but it was also their only shot at turning the tide. The enemy was reeling from the loss of their command ship, and if they struck now, they could break the fleet before it had a chance to recover. "It's risky," Alaric said, his tone cautious. "But it could work." "We'll need to move fast," Jax added, his voice tinged with excitement. "Hit them before they can regroup." Nash nodded, his resolve hardening. "Get us in position," he ordered. "We'll launch the strike as soon as we're ready." As the Buzzard moved back toward the enemy fleet, Nash felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of the entire sector. The enemy was vulnerable, and if they struck now, they could end the invasion before it even began. Approaching the fleet, Alaric reported from the helm, his voice steady. "We're within range." Nash studied the display, his eyes locked on the massive warships spread out before them. The fleet was still large, but without their command structure, they were disorganized, flying blind. This was their chance. "Take us in close," Nash ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We hit their supply lines first, cut off their reinforcements." The Buzzard glided silently through the darkness, its stealth systems masking its presence from the enemy's sensors. Nash's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the first target, a massive supply vessel brimming with fuel and munitions. "Target locked," Kara reported, her hands flying over the weapons console. "Ready to fire on your command." Nash took a deep breath, his pulse racing. "Fire!" The ship's plasma cannons roared to life, sending a volley of glowing blue bolts toward the supply vessel. The impact was immediate and devastating. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending debris spiraling through the void. "One down," Nash muttered, his eyes scanning the display for the next target. "Let's keep moving." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity as the Buzzard darted through the enemy fleet, striking at vulnerable targets with deadly precision. Nash's crew moved with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine, each strike more devastating than the last. "Fuel reserves are down by 40%, Jax reported, his voice filled with excitement. "They're running out of resources fast." "They're scrambling," Alaric added, his eyes locked on the display. "We've got them on the ropes." Nash felt a surge of pride as he watched the enemy fleet fall apart before his eyes. They had done it, they had turned the tide. The invasion was faltering, and the Federation would have time to regroup and launch a counteroffensive. But the fight wasn't over yet. Incoming transmission, Kara reported, her brow furrowing. It's from Federation Command. Put it through, Nash said, his voice steady. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the face of Admiral Kira Valen, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Federation fleet. Her expression was grim, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Captain Weaver, she said, her voice filled with urgency. We've received your transmission. Reinforcements are en route, but we need you to hold the line until they arrive. The enemy is regrouping, and we can't afford to lose this sector. Nash nodded, his resolve hardening. We'll hold the line, Admiral. Just get here as fast as you can. Valen's expression softened slightly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I knew I could count on you, Captain. Valen out. The transmission cut off, leaving Nash and his crew in tense silence. Looks like we're not done yet, Nash muttered, his pulse quickening. Alaric, get us in position. We're going to finish what we started. As the Buzzard prepared for the final push, Nash felt a sense of calm wash over him. They had fought hard, taken risks, and turned the tide. Now, all that was left was to hold the line until reinforcements arrived. The enemy fleet was still out there, weakened but not defeated. And Nash knew that the hardest battle was yet to come. But he was ready. As the ship's engines roared to life, Nash's gaze drifted toward the stars. The void stretched out before them, dark and endless. But beyond that darkness lay hope, hope for the Principality, for the Federation, and for the future. And as long as the Buzzard flew, Nash would fight for that future, no matter the cost.
Thank you so much for joining us on this cosmic journey. If you enjoyed the ride, please hit that subscribe button and share the adventure with others. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more incredible stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the stars.